We're in conversation with the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. The Nelson Mandela Foundation, in fact, has been vocal about extending the spirit of Ubuntu. It raised concern about the vulnerable position of marginalized African foreign nationals in South Africa during the COVID-19 lockdown. The foundation says that millions were already surviving on below the breadline, and that the lockdown has been even survivalist economic activity, has made survivalist economic activity rather impossible. Now, Sello Hatang is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation and joins me to discuss a little bit further. Sello, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight on Flatten the Curve. I mean, arguably, you know, as we seek to embrace the spirit and the philosophy of Ubuntu, perhaps before we get into the nitty-gritties of some of the contradictions and even challenges that have surfaced to date, I mean, from the foundation's perspective, how would you describe the essence of what Ubuntu stands for? You know, what Utata Madiba warranted when he spoke about Ubuntu?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Liezle. And in fact, your previous guest, Prof. Pidigantuli, someone that I respect hugely, described it so well that Ubuntu has always been part of who we are. It's always been informing how we conduct our own lives in terms of how whenever one is suffering, you kind of feel that that suffering is yours too. In Setswana, they would say, "Matlo khosha mabapi," for example. If my house or my neighbor's house burns, I should act as though it's my own house that's burning down. And I think you cannot have a situation where some have a lot and others have nothing. And that's why Ubuntu then is there. And Madiba would use this phrase, which is popularly known, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, that you are because I am too, and we need to be ensuring that we always just join hands to help others so that we all succeed.
Now, Sello, in my introduction, obviously it was highlighted that there have been some inequalities rife in a South African and African context, and perhaps has become exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic, to say the least. I want to know from you, in terms of applying the philosophy of Ubuntu, you know, during these unprecedented times, to perhaps provide a way forward for all. I mean, how do you say the foundation has encompassed the essence of Ubuntu during these unprecedented times?
You know, I want to take us back, I want to take the viewers back to 2015, when we hosted Thomas Piketty, who was here to look into the issue of poverty and inequality. And he did indicate that if we don't do anything about inequality today, in a time of peace, relative peace, it will then lead to a revolution where you are forced to then reckon with that kind of reality. What the foundation has done since then, preceding that time, was to convene dialogues on how do we deal with this pandemic of inequality. And that's why even now, this year, we will be hosting the UN Secretary General. And part of this, what he will be looking into is the pandemic of inequality, which has now become so real, much more real than we wanted to accept and believe it was, because COVID-19 has now made us confronted. And I'm hoping that as the foundation, we are hoping that we will be able to tackle this challenge of inequality head on, and make sure that we flatten the curve of inequality using the very principle, the very value that's core to our own nation's understanding of how you feed each other through Ubuntu.
So I'm just looking at the implications of the inequality that's obviously rife in South Africa today, and the importance, the urgency of addressing the matter, and then also extending it to the African continent. I mean, how have we managed to balance the two to date? What more needs to be done to foster those relations?
You know, one of the things that has been paining us as the Nelson Mandela Foundation has been these sporadic attacks on non-nationals. And Siya Kolisi, Rachel Kolisi and I recently went to the refugee camp that's in Cape Town to try and look at the plight of refugees and how South Africa we treated refugees. And I think it's true to say that we still have a lot to ensure that the continent feels that this is also but at a time like we should be ensuring that those who are in need, particularly those who have no hope, that they where people who have fled their homes because of one reason or another, in most cases, of war. And despite those